Good afternoon. Welcome to Recovering Perfectionist Mama. Today we're talking about media perfectionism, the untold cost of being seen the wrong way. When the story has to be clean, there's a quiet rule that operates both in families and in public life. The story has to make sense, it has to be tidy, and it has to fit what people already believe. And when it doesn't, the problem isn't assumed to be the story. It's assumed to be the person telling it. This is what I call media perfectionism, the same psychological force that tells individuals to perform their pain correctly in order to be believed, now operating at a cultural scale. And just like personal perfectionism, it comes at a cost. I know a lot of you remember my Darlie video, and a lot of people had issues with the silly string, where she had gone to the gravesite of her boys and had been putting silly string on the tombstones. A lot of people were very upset by that. And we had talked about in that video about how sometimes someone could have a certain intention that may not compute to others who are seeing it. They may see it as an indicia of guilt. They may see it as a lack of remorse. They may see it as, she was happy that her children were gone. So that's just an example of how you could potentially be seen the wrong way. The need for a perfect narrative. In law, in media, and in public discourse, complexity is uncomfortable. People want a perfect victim. They want a perfect defendant. They want a clean timeline, a clear motive, a likable messenger. Like we talked about when we did the Eileen Wuornos video, how her anger and her mannerisms did not compute with someone who people would believe might be innocent. Her rough exterior caused people to believe that she was 100% guilty because was she a person who people could relate to? No, she had a lot of anger. She had a lot of trauma. And she had things that made her unlikable. People want defendants who are clean cut, who are what we expect them to be, maybe remorseful, maybe declaring their innocence. Again, we all have perceptions. When those elements that I just mentioned are all present, belief comes easily. When they aren't, doubt fills the gap. And this isn't because people are cruel, it's because uncertainty threatens our sense of order. A messy story asks more of us: patience, discernment, humility, restraint from judgment. Perfectionism offers a shortcut. How perception overtakes fact. When a person is seen the wrong way, facts begin to lose their weight. Tone is scrutinized, emotion is analyzed, behavior is interpreted rather than understood. Too calm, suspicious. Too emotional, unstable. Too articulate, manipulative. Too messy, unreliable. The story becomes less about what happened and more about how well it's being told. And that's when truth starts competing with optics. The unconscious standard we apply. Most people don't realize they're doing this. They think they're evaluating credibility, when in reality they're assessing their own comfort with the individual who's speaking. Comfort with how someone looks, how someone speaks, how someone reacts under pressure, whether their pain is recognizable. When a story violates expectation, people instinctively search for a reason. And often that reason becomes the person themselves. When complexity is punished, here's the parallel that matters. This is the same mechanism that operates in families where perfectionism takes root. You learn early. Don't say it like that. That's not the right tone. You're making it worse. Why can't you just let it go? The truth isn't rejected outright. It's dismissed as poorly delivered. On the flip side of that, trauma survivors, people who've experienced trauma in families similar to this, know that tone, voice, quality, how it's said, what's not said, probably what they want to say, are all things that are noticed by someone who's experienced significant trauma. And that is what keeps them safe. And for a lot of people who've not experienced trauma, that just seems so foreign because they didn't need that to survive, right? And then I've actually worked with several trauma survivors, and if you talk to a lot of them, they will tell you something as simple as the footsteps, how heavy the footsteps are, how fast they're coming. Those are all things that they're listening to, as well as how the person is breathing and just all these like subtle signs. But that's what they use to survive. The truth isn't rejected outright. It's dismissed as poorly delivered, which is a way of kind of circumventing what they're actually trying to say. But the person that they're talking to, who is in their family unit, knows exactly what they're saying. And over time, you internalize that message. If I could just explain it better, they'd understand. That belief follows people into adulthood. It's also why some people are triggered by certain things. For instance, I find myself sometimes being triggered by being asked a clarifying question because it's almost like the person doesn't believe what I'm saying. So if I say, oh my goodness, like it's snowing outside, and the person was like, it's snowing outside? Like, what do you mean it's snowing outside? It literally sometimes makes me feel like, oh my goodness, because a lot of times growing up, I would be asked about certain things, and it would be kind of like the person was impatient. So it was like, come on, hurry, it was like, did that really happen? I mean, is that what, and you just kind of go into that and you just kind of go back to some of the things that used to make you really self-conscious growing up. It's like, come on, spit it out, say it, and it's like, and the same thing happens in a lot of these families as well. People are in a hurry, people are frustrated, people are just like, go, say it, or when they question, well, did that really happen? Like, why are you saying that? Like, just little things, and I think that a lot of people who have experienced that know that there's certain things that are like, okay, this is kind of like, do they think I'm lying? Do they think, like, what is going on? And so this belief follows people into adulthood, into courtrooms, into workplaces, into public judgment, into conversations with your spouse. I mean, things that, you oftentimes find that you may bleed on people that didn't cut you, just because certain things take you back to a time when you felt powerless, when you felt like you were being put on the spot. I think one of the worst things that I recall, and this wasn't from family, this was actually from an educator. I was actually in broadcasting when I was in high school, and I had a very, very persnickety, I think persnickety is a great word for him, persnickety broadcasting teacher. And this particular broadcasting teacher was very, very fickle at times. I mean, he just was, and he had a very strange sense of humor, and he was almost kind of abusive, dare I say. I mean, he liked me at one point, and then he got upset about some sort of crazy allegation about, a freaking mic clip and blamed me for it, which I did not take it or anything. But I had to put us on the air for our school. And I was so, I'm the type of person that I freeze when I get stressed out. And so he said, okay, we got to get on air. And so I had a moment where I just completely, and he was like, nobody help her. And I literally am sitting there floundering. And he literally waits till we're 3 seconds before we have to go on the air. And he's like, get out of the way. And he enters the code. And to this day, I've never forgotten that code. It's BO203. But at that time, I could not think of it because I was so stressed out. And he was being so abusive and nasty to me that I just literally, it just went out of my head. And it's crazy because some 26 years later, I still have that code in my head. And I've never forgotten it. And I just think about how people do not realize that the way they treat people is extremely important. And that, you may be trying to be macho or like show off for other students or whatever. But there's no reason to be nasty to people for no reason. There's my PSA for the day, guys. No reason to be nasty to people for no reason. So the cost of being seen the wrong way. When media perfectionism takes over, it does real harm. It silences people who don't present neatly. The person that comes to mind is Zenaida Gonzalez. I don't know if you all remember when the Casey Anthony trial happened in Orlando. She had said that there was a lady named Zenaida Gonzalez who was the sitter for her daughter, Sandy the nanny. And John Morgan from Orlando had represented Zenaida in a civil suit against Casey Anthony. Zenaida Gonzalez, we talk about not showing up neatly in the right way. She did wear a very revealing outfit, her choice, whatever. And I don't think that she had been as prepared to present her statement as John Morgan probably would have liked. Maybe he didn't have the time to prepare her. I don't know. Excuse me. But they were actually looking for a civil suit against Casey Anthony for defaming her name because she had said her name's Zenaida Gonzalez. So you think about something like that, that could potentially damage optics for whatever reason, limit their recovery and things like that. It rewards confidence over accuracy. It mistakes polish for integrity and teaches survivors that credibility must be earned through performance. People begin editing themselves in real time, not to clarify truth, but to make it palatable. Palatable for the people that are watching, so they will not get in the crosshairs of a journalist or a podcaster or someone who is going to make fun of them or humiliate them or make them feel less than. And ultimately, why do we go after the people that are telling their truth, telling their story, right? Oh, well, they shouldn't have worn that, or they should have. Can't we just be kind? Can't we just be nice to people, for goodness sakes? And the most damaging part, the story starts changing to meet expectations, which then labels you as a person who's probably committing perjury or lying or being untruthful for whatever reason, or maybe they're the person that committed the murder. You never know. Not because it's false, but because it's trying to survive scrutiny. Why this matters beyond the screen. This isn't just a media problem. It shapes how juries think, how communities respond, how institutions justify outcomes. When we demand perfection from stories, we make justice conditional. And justice that depends on likability is not justice at all. It's preference. What a healthier standard looks like. A healthier system doesn't ask, do I like how this sounds? Does this fit what I expect? It asks, what evidence exists? Because ultimately, evidence is the only thing that you should be concerned about. Evidence, the fact that the trial is a fair and impartial trial, the fact that the jury knows their responsibilities, and that they are honest and they're going to uphold their responsibilities, the fact that the jury applies the law as it should, the fact that the jury doesn't come in knowing more about the defendant than they should know, because that can alter the way that the trial goes. It can alter whether they convict or not. That the jury is giving everyone, regardless of their race, their religious status, or any other metric that shouldn't be measured, a fair shake. That's important. What power dynamics are present? Who benefits from disbelief? And it accepts that truth is often awkward, nonlinear, and emotionally consistent. I know that some of you have watched The Perfect Victim, and so I had mentioned something along those lines about when someone has been a victim of a sexual assault, generally the body kind of tries to protect them. And so it's really difficult for them to initially to make heads or tails of the actual chronological order of what occurred. And so sometimes it will take a little bit of time for them to actually be able to go back and actually piece together what happened. It's almost like it's like a puzzle that they're having to put together, which can make it seem like they're not being credible. And then sometimes that will come back later afterwards, and they can kind of figure out kind of where things, because, trauma does a lot of things to people. For instance, I once heard a story of a woman who was being sexually assaulted at a party, and her friend had found her and was trying to rescue her. But the problem with it was she was so like traumatized and so like just frantic that her legs would not move. And so it took, I think they said like 2 to 3 blocks before she was able to get her legs to move so that she could get away. And clearly she wanted to get away, and her friend wanted her to get away. I mean, our body does some crazy things. And then if you've seen those videos of those people that are doing that thing in Orlando, like I forget what the ride's called, but where they literally just go out. I mean, that is just, no thank you. No thank you. Those videos just like, I can't watch them. I mean, they are very, very hard to watch. Because human beings are, right? We're awkward. We're nonlinear. We're emotionally inconsistent. In closing, here's a personal invitation. If you've ever felt dismissed because your story didn't come out perfectly, if you've ever doubted yourself because others focused on how you spoke instead of what you said, if you've ever tried to make pain more acceptable so it could be heard, there is nothing wrong with your story. The problem is not that it's imperfect. The problem is that perfection was never the right standard to begin with. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.